Ian's Car.
Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. Just like to say this is the final part, which is part 3 of our Land Rover front hub rebuild. If you like what you've seen, please by all means give us a thumbs up and subscribe, and if there's anything you want us to know, or perhaps maybe we may not be giving you some good information, we'd be glad to hear from you. We're only human and we'll always do our best to try and answer all your questions. It's time for us to prepare the hub and get it ready for installation on the vehicle. This is an outer bearing shell or casing or whatever you want to call it. And we've taken the liberty of starting this one already in there, and we're going to use one of the old ones as a means to help that on its way, get it into the hub. So we're not directly hammering onto it. So take your time over this, don't rush things, just do a little bit here, a little bit there, and you'll soon see that that's beginning to find its way nicely into the hub. Have a little quick look and see where we are. We've still got about 1/4 of an inch to go, so I think that's about as far as we're going to get with that. I'll just try a little bit more, but I don't think we're going to get much further. So now we take a punch and we very carefully tap the bearing down. Soft punch, don't use a hardened punch because there's a risk of damaging the bearing. Brass one's preferable, but this is just a soft steel one, so this is not going to give us any problems. Another little look, see where we are. Yep, a little bit further to go yet. Making sure there's no burrs or anything on anything. Look, yep, we're literally within 10-20 thou of that mating, and when it does, what you'll hear is like a loud, it'll change note. There we go. Okay, just inspect those surfaces to make sure there's no dirt or debris or any kind of damage that's ended up occurring. Well, we're happy with that. Everything looks good. We'll turn it over and we'll do the same thing on the other side. Right, here we are packing the wheel bearing. So I've got some grease in there already, And the way I'm doing it, it's a big dollop in your hand, and you're pushing the bearing down and turning it, pushing it down and turning it, forcing it up inside, and turn the bearing over and do the same thing, so you get plenty of grease in there. Right, okay, so we'll just take rid of that, and we'll just very carefully place that into the hub. Any surplus we'll just place into the centre of the bearing area there, there's a big void in there. You don't want to fill that right up, because you can give yourself problems with the grease expanding, and what can invariably happen is it can even force the grease seal out. Right, okay, let's have a quick clean up. As you can see, it's quite a messy process, and the grease we're actually using is this particular one. It's an EP2 grease. It's a multi-purpose wheel bearing grease. It runs on a high temperature, and it also will do universal joints as well in your prop shaft. So good quality stuff, used it many times, never had any issue with it, very pleased with it. Okay, we're at this stage now, we're ready to fit the grease seal. We're using these Cortico seals, and you can see the part number there very clearly. These seals are about the best quality you can get without going totally overboard and buying Land Rover stuff. This seal goes in this way. As you can see, it's got a raised lip on that area that helps to protect dust and dirt getting in. We're gonna just put that in there like that for a moment, and then what we're going to do is come back and show you when we've installed it, because this seal has to go in at a certain depth and it's quite fiddly to get right. So rather than you watch us do it and it's like watching paint dry, we'll put it in and then we'll explain it all in detail to you. What I've done is I've made sure that that seal is seated in the right depth in the hub. The main reason is because there's this kind of like flexible seal bit here which keeps the dust out. If that seal isn't in enough, that will get damaged and that will become, you know, just not usable and will cause problems. And the way we've done it, that seal should be in 4mm. We've taken a vernier gauge and we've measured the depth of it there. We've measured there, there, there and there, and it all shows 4mm. It's very small to see on here, so it's pointless trying to get it, but trust me, that measures it 4mm. So that's that bit done, that's that bit of the bearing installed. The other bit's quite simple now, because we basically put the rotor on and then we offer it up to the vehicle. We grease the front bearing, which is in the box, and then we assemble it with new lock tabs and bolts. I think we'll leave it there just for a second and then we'll come back when we're a bit more organised. As you can see, I've already mounted the brake disc onto the hub, and I'm now cleaning up the bolts, making sure they're ready for Loctite. We've also got a vinyl glove over the centre of the hub to stop any dirt ingress into the grease bearings. At this point you can see me applying Loctite, and that will enable us to make sure the bolts are securely kept in place because there's no spring washers under there. I'm just going to run these down very quickly with the impact gun on a low setting just to save time, and in a second you'll see me sorting the torque wrench out, which is set at 65 Newton meters for these bolts. We're also applying some of the vehicle's wheel nuts to the studs so that it will enable us to protect the hub stud threads when we torque down. As you can see, we've got that in the vise at the moment, torquing it all up. Okay, so it's just one last quick check of the stub axle prior to us fitting the hub, making sure it's all nice and clean, blowing any dust away from there that could be on there. System gets out of the way there. It's time to put the hub assembly on. We've taken the rubber vinyl glove off there. That was put on there just to protect the bearing so no dirt or anything got in the bearing and seal. We put this on, this is quite simple, there's no need to really show you that, it's very much self-explanatory, this tone guard. We put some grease Vaseline on there so that when we slip this on it will protect the seal, and now we're going to slip the hub assembly onto the stub axle. Okay, that's gone on nicely. You see that's there, and the next item we'll be placing on will be the bearing. That's already been pre-packed, so we explained that in the last earlier on in the video. So that then goes on nicely there, make sure that fits down nicely. At this stage you probably want to wipe a little bit of this surplus off just to make it easier to operate. It's leaving plenty of grease still in there. Right, the next item is the first lot. This is the hub nut. This actually adjusts the preload on the bearing. But before we put that on, I'm going to make sure we put this thrust washer on here. So that goes on there, like so. It locates on the flap of there and just fits over. Then we carefully wind the nut on. This should basically go on more or less finger tight. Shouldn't be any issues with this at all. A bit slippery with the grease, that's all. Right, we've got a 52mm socket that we use for putting that on with. I'll just give that a quick wipe, make sure there's no dirt inside of there.
What, you're not going to use a chisel?
No, we're not going to do what the other guys did when they took it apart when we stripped it out. No, no chisels here. Right, nice clean socket. Just do it up by hand. Everything gets a bit slippery when you use grease, so it's always a bit of a nightmare. Right, you can just feel that beginning to go up by hand. Right, okay. What we're going to do, we're just going to bed the bearing down so that we've got it nicely nipped. You can do this, it's going up a little bit more now. Feel it until it comes on. Give that a spin, make sure that's running all right. Yeah, that's fine. What I tend to do, good old nip like that, just to set the bearing in. You can feel there's a bit more resistance on there now. Give it a few turns. Back it off, spin it freely. Yeah, it's much freer. I always do it twice. Just want to make sure that I get that bedded in properly. The last thing we want is to take this all apart when it's gone down the road and we find out we need to readjust it. So another nip, just a nip, doesn't need too much. Another spin. Yeah, that's definitely seated in nicely. Take that off. Right, okay. Now we come to the important bit, just making sure that we get the right end float. Some people call it end float, some people call it preload. There shouldn't actually be any real physical movement in that hub, but it should just have a slight little bit of preload on that bearing so that it just runs that way. It's all done because the bearings are taper roller bearings and obviously things heat up, so if you get that too tight and everything expands, then it's going to wreck the bearings and then you're going to be tearing all the bearings to pieces and you're going to be back to square one again, replacing all the parts that we've just replaced here. Anyway, I'll just clean this up a little bit and then we'll go into the actual adjustment side of it. Okay, so we've cleaned the socket down a little bit, we're not so slippery on our hands. And what we need to do, we need to put that on, basically do that up by hand, and that is tight enough. We don't need to do that anymore. You shouldn't be able to feel any play at all in there. No, you can't. Right, so the next stage is get a cloth and clean that out. Just give that another turn, make sure that's all okay. Yeah, we'll give that a check that again. That's it, that's tight enough, just by hand. So all you've got to do. So we can see what we're doing. It's better. Right, so, okay, that nut is now adjusted. Now to keep that nut in that position, adjusted to that specific setting that we've done, we're going to put this lock tab on. Just get that to go, yeah. And then what we're going to do is put the locking nut in position. Now what we'll do is we'll show locking the tab over in a minute. Okay, if I just turn that slightly, you probably can see a little bit better as to what I'm doing there. So let's just put that on. Fiddly to get on, you've got to be careful with these. Right. Okay. What have I done with that big ratchet? There it is there. When we tighten this up, it won't, oh, what's happening to my ratchet? That's something weird going on here. It's locking. won't affect strange. I just decided to have a funny moment. As you can see, it's not affecting that bearing at all. Right, let's just nip that up. Right, now that torque is set to 65 Newton meters. We've already got the torque wrench set at that. There we go, 65 Newton meters. Okay, so we're on the last lap of the hub now. As we were dealing with earlier, we've locked the lock tab over on the inner nut that way, and then we bent the lock tab on this side this way on the outer nut. That stops either nut from moving. As I said before, once that nut was done up to the specific torque, it couldn't interfere with the setting of the bearing, because this lock washer goes in between the two nuts, so there's no way that it would change the preload on that bearing that we set up. Just want to clarify that. By the way, if there is anything you think I've missed or I've fallen short on or I haven't explained correctly, then by all means drop us a line. You know, there'll be a place for comments to be put on site, so there we go. But anyway, we're only human, so we're doing the best we can, but there we go. We're doing a good job here, and we're coming very close to closing this section off now. Anyway, this is the next piece to go on. We've lubricated there on the splines, we've lubricated inside there, and we've also stuck the gasket on with some grease. So now we're going to put that, actually make that onto stub axle, to the hub rather, not stub axle on the brain. I'll just turn that so we, you can see there's no play in that at all. This actual flange is in very good condition, therefore it won't give us any problems as regards to wear or noises. If you can get a lot of rock and play on that, then if you haven't replaced the CV and you haven't replaced that, then you're going to have to replace them both as a pair, because you can't do them individually. You won't fix it by just putting one piece on. But in our case, the CV was brand new, this was in perfect condition, and as you can see, there's no play at all in that. We're quite happy with that. So right, let's get the bolts in. We've already Loctited them up. Obviously cleaned all the threads, made sure everything's good. Just let that go into there, that's it. There is a torque setting for these, it's 60 Newton meters. We'll firstly nip them up and then we'll set the torque wrench up and get it all torqued up. Right, okay, all those have started nicely. Just to speed things up, we'll use the little gun. We'll put it on a low setting so we don't have any issues. We'll just carefully run those bolts up. This saves a lot of time by doing this. We can also carefully watch make sure that the gasket is nicely seated. This is only on a very low setting, this gun, so. Right. Okay, next step. Torque wrench. Hopefully I can put my hands on a socket straight away. Possibly that one, yeah. No, that's too big. Actually, it's on the gun over here. I've already set the torque wrench up, so we're all good to go. Right, what we need to do here is get a locking bar in position. I might have to get the help of my colleague. Come in and just put a locking bar in there while we torque this up. Right. I think it's best if you stand this side, Martin. And then I think, is that going to be correct? I can never quite work this out. I think it's got to go the other way, just like that. Right, okay, let's just see. I'll catch it. Okay. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's check them again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's that done. Okay, so we're about to do the end float on the CVJ. You can see that moving in and out of there. We've got this little tool that we've got, we screw into the end of here. Basically it's a thread cleaner that we use. I haven't done it, I've got it all going in the wrong place. So, there we go. So we screw that into the end there, and that enables us to push and pull. You can hear that moving backwards and forwards. We've got the circlip mated on there so that we can see what the end float is. These are 2 shims I've selected, and I think this is what's going to be the case. So I think these are going to be okay. So we'll just give it a little try. Pop those into there like that, and then we'll see. Pull that right out, right into there, tight down on the hub, and yes, we've just got maybe about 0.5 millimetre end float, which is about right. I do believe the setting is 0.08 to 0.25, but I tend to like them on the tight side because we've got some new parts inside of here and things will tend to bed down a little bit, so that clearance could become a little bit greater. So I'd rather want it on the tight side rather than the other end of the scale, which would be on the loose side, which would give you more end float. Anyway, let's take the circlip off and we'll show you what we've got when we've mounted these 2 things, 2 shims. Tricky here. Careful not to lose the circlip around the workshop somewhere. Put that back in there. Right, we'll mount these. I tend to mount the thinner shim towards the hub face and the thicker shim towards the circlip, just so that it's more likely to, it's better that way because it gives it a bit more support when you're on the circlip. If you have a thinner shim, it's more likely to bend or buckle or twist or something or wear out. Okay, so here we go. Pull that light out, move that in slightly. Always a tricky moment, this. You need a screwdriver or something just to push the circlip home. There we go. It went in click then.
How many circlips you put in? Not circlips, shims.
Pardon?
How many shims did you put in?
2 shims went in. Yeah. I'll just give that a very light tap with a little punch just to make sure that's in position. Just get one from over here. Actually, we can use that. Just a light tap with a screwdriver onto the circlip. There we go. The circlip's now home in its right position. And now we can see it when we just turn the circlip in the groove. There we go. So now we should just have, yep, we have that desired about 1/2 millimetre. You can just hear a tiny little click, it going in. That's absolutely perfect. Right, okay, so we'll remove this. That's redundant now. I do believe we've got a new cap for the bearing. Oh, it's over here somewhere. There we go. Oh, an original Land Rover one, look at that. Wow, I don't see that very often. Just being facetious. It'll probably break now. Probably better off with a brick part one. We seem to like brick part, don't we?
You do. Well, wouldn't knock Land Rover too much.
Right, okay, so what we're going to do, actually these are quite pliable, so they're quite good, so they'll make a good seal on there. I'm going to put a dob of grease in there, whack it on, and that'll always make sure that that spline and everything's all greased up. There we go, nice big dollop of grease in there, as you can see. Put that over there, probably put too much in now. Yeah, I might have done. And that's it on. Anyway, there we go. I say that, it's not quite straight. But anyway, I think I might have put too much grease in there. Let's take some of that. Yeah, I think I put a bit too much in there. There we go. That's now on. Right, so that just about concludes everything. Thank you for watching our channel. And of course, you know, by all means, hit the like button and possibly just subscribe if you feel like doing it. And if there's anything you want us to venture in the future, or you think there's something we might like to show you more stuff on Land Rovers or any other kind of vehicles like this, then please drop us a line. We'd be glad to hear from you. Anyway, that's it for today. Bye for now.